It's a good bounce back win for us today. I thought we started the game with the right tone on the defensive end. And so that was
It was supposed to be a simple basketball story, a bounce-back win, the right defensive tone, a team doing what it was expected to do. On the surface, everything looked normal. The quotes sounded familiar. The post-game messaging was clean, and the narrative stayed safely inside the lines. This was framed as a routine moment in a long season, nothing more than execution and effort finally lining up. But beneath that calm exterior, something far more unsettling was already brewing. While the team spoke about defense and focus, the basketball world was quietly beginning to realize that what we were told for months about one of the biggest decisions in modern women's basketball was never the full truth. For months, fans were encouraged to believe that Caitlyn Clark's absence from Team USA was just a standard roster decision. Experience, system fit, paying dues, all the usual excuses were rolled out and widely accepted. We told ourselves this was normal, that stars sometimes have to wait their turn. But that belief rested on one fragile assumption, that the decision was actually about basketball. As time passed, cracks began to show in that explanation. Whispers turned into rumors, and rumors turned into leaks. And once those leaks surfaced, the comfortable illusion collapsed completely. What looked like a harmless selection choice started to feel deliberate, calculated, and deeply personal, setting the stage for a controversy far bigger than any single game or roster spot. The moment the leaks began to surface, the entire conversation shifted. What had once been dismissed as speculation suddenly carried weight. Because these details weren't coming from fans or media hot takes, they were coming from inside the room. According to reports tied to Team USA's selection process, the discussions surrounding Caitlyn Clark had very little to do with her shooting, her playmaking, or her ability to contribute on the world's biggest stage. Instead, the concern that dominated the room was something far more revealing: fear. Not fear of losing games, but fear of attention. The committee reportedly worried that if Caitlyn made the roster and wasn't given star minutes, the backlash from her massive fan base would become a distraction they didn't want to manage. That revelation shattered any remaining trust in the official explanation. Caitlyn Clark wasn't excluded because she couldn't help Team USA win. She was excluded because she was too powerful. Her popularity wasn't viewed as an asset, but as a threat to comfort, control, and hierarchy. The irony is brutal. At a time when women's basketball is fighting for visibility, the people in charge chose to remove the brightest spotlight out of fear of standing beneath it. That single leak reframed everything. This wasn't about protecting the team, it was about protecting egos. And once fans realized that the decision was rooted in fear rather than fairness, the backlash Team USA tried to avoid became unavoidable. Before we go further, make sure to like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel if you want honest breakdowns of the biggest stories in women's basketball. Your support keeps these conversations alive. Once the truth behind the leak settled in, it became impossible to unsee the pattern. Caitlyn Clark wasn't viewed as a rookie who needed time to adjust. She was viewed as a force that couldn't be controlled. Her fan base, millions strong, was framed as a problem rather than proof of growth for the sport. Inside those closed-door conversations, the fear wasn't about whether she could compete at the Olympic level, but about what would happen if she didn't play enough. The idea that public reaction might overshadow coaching decisions terrified the selection committee. So instead of embracing the moment, they tried to eliminate it altogether. In doing so, they revealed a mindset rooted in avoidance, not leadership. That decision exposed a deeper issue within Team USA's structure, a preference for silence over progress. Rather than trusting fans to understand rotations or development, the committee chose control over connection. They would rather field a team without its biggest draw than risk explaining why a star might sit. That logic flips the purpose of sports on its head. The audience isn't a nuisance, it's the lifeblood of the game. By framing Caitlyn Clark's popularity as a liability, Team USA sent a chilling message about who the sport is really for. And once fans realized they were being treated as an inconvenience, the relationship between the program and the public began to fracture in ways that won't be easily repaired. What happened next may seem trivial to outsiders, but inside sports culture, it spoke volumes. For Caitlyn Clark, the number 22 isn't just a jersey. It's an identity. It's the number tied to record-breaking nights, historic crowds, and a generation of young fans who wear it proudly in gyms and arenas across the country. So, when reports emerged that Team USA reassigned her number during training camp, giving 22 to someone else and handing Caitlyn a different jersey, it landed like a deliberate slap. This wasn't about logistics or availability. In a world driven by symbolism, that kind of move sends a message loud and clear. You are not special here, and you will be treated like everyone else, no matter what you've accomplished. That message wasn't about team unity, it was about power. Stripping a star of her number is one of the oldest ways organizations attempt to assert control, especially over someone whose influence extends far beyond the locker room. It was an attempt to humble Caitlyn Clark, to shrink her presence, and remind her who was in charge. But instead of breaking her, it exposed the insecurity behind the gesture. You don't need to diminish someone unless you feel threatened by what they represent. And in trying to reduce Caitlyn to just another player, Team USA only amplified the perception that they were more focused on protecting hierarchy than building the best possible team. At the center of this growing storm stands head coach Cheryl Reeve. And this is where the story stops being subtle. Long before the Olympic roster was finalized, the tension was already visible to anyone paying attention. Even before Caitlyn Clark stepped onto a WNBA court, Reeve was publicly urging people to slow down the hype, framing the excitement around the rookie class as excessive and misplaced. Those comments didn't exist in a vacuum. They set a tone, one that positioned Caitlyn not as the future of the sport, but as a disruption to the established order. As the season progressed, that tone hardened into something that felt less like guidance and more like resistance. When the Olympic snub became official, Reeve's response only poured gasoline on the fire. There was no acknowledgement of the historic opportunity being missed, no recognition of the moment or the player involved. Instead, the messaging came off cold and dismissive, as if the idea that Caitlyn Clark belonged on the roster was absurd. Behind the scenes, reports of social media activity, subtle digs, and an unwillingness to give credit painted a picture of a coach unwilling to share the spotlight. What could have been a mentor-player relationship quickly took on the shape of a feud. And once that mindset filtered into the selection committee, it stopped being personal opinion and became institutional policy. As more insiders began to speak, the controversy moved from theory to something far more troubling. Reports from within Team USA training environments suggested that even when Caitlyn Clark was present, she was never truly empowered. Instead of building offensive sets around her shooting, gravity, and playmaking ability, she was often pushed to the margins, stationed in the corner, used as a decoy, or ignored entirely in key actions. For a player whose range forces defenses to stretch beyond the half-court line, this approach made no basketball sense. It felt intentional, as if the goal wasn't to see what Caitlyn could do, but to limit her influence until she looked ordinary. That's where the sabotage allegations take root. When a system is designed in a way that suppresses a player's strengths, failure becomes predictable and then conveniently justifiable. If Caitlyn struggled within those rigid sets, it could be framed as proof that she wasn't ready, reinforcing the original decision to keep her off the roster. It's a classic gatekeeping tactic. Deny opportunity, then point to the outcome as validation. For fans and analysts watching from the outside, the idea that the greatest shooter of her generation was being intentionally underutilized wasn't just frustrating, it was infuriating. It suggested that maintaining control mattered more than maximizing talent, even at the highest level of the sport. What the establishment expected next never happened. They assumed Caitlyn Clark would push back publicly, issue statements through her agent, or quietly fall in line to regain favor. Instead, she chose silence, and that silence was deafening. When optional minicamp invitations were sent out, Caitlyn declined to attend. No drama, no explanation, no public complaint. She simply stepped away and focused on rest and her off-season. To casual observers, it looked harmless. To the people running USA basketball, it was a warning shot. By withdrawing her presence, Caitlyn made one thing clear: access to her star power is not automatic, and respect is not optional. That decision flipped the power dynamic completely. Team USA could control rosters, minutes, and narratives, but they couldn't force Caitlyn Clark to show up. Her absence spoke louder than any press conference ever could. Ratings dip when she's not on the floor. Conversations fade. Energy disappears. By choosing silence over submission, Caitlyn exposed how dependent the system truly is on her relevance. It wasn't a tantrum, it was leverage. And as that reality set in, the panic behind closed doors reportedly began to grow. Because for the first time, Team USA had to confront a future where the biggest star in women's basketball might not need them at all. Once the situation reached the corporate level, the stakes changed instantly. This was no longer just about coaching, philosophy, or roster politics. It was about money. Massive money. Caitlyn Clark isn't just an athlete. She's a global investment. Nike has reportedly committed tens of millions of dollars to her brand, building an entire signature line and marketing strategy around her image. NBC, the Olympic broadcast partner, depends on stars to drive viewership. From a business standpoint, a Team USA roster without Caitlyn Clark isn't just puzzling, it's reckless. Every data point from the WNBA season told the same story. Games featuring Caitlyn shattered viewership records, while games without her reverted to historical norm. That reality has reportedly created serious tension behind the scenes. Sponsors don't care about internal hierarchies or who paid their dues. They care about eyeballs, engagement, and return on investment. The upcoming 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles represent a once-in-a-generation opportunity to elevate women's basketball on home soil. And right now, Caitlyn Clark is the face capable of carrying that moment. When a coach or committee stands in the way of that vision, it becomes more than a sports decision. It becomes a business liability. Pressure is mounting. Questions are being asked. And for the first time, the possibility of change within USA basketball feels real because the financial consequences of getting this wrong are simply too large to ignore. Looking at the bigger picture, the situation with Caitlyn Clark echoes painful moments from basketball history. In men's basketball, we've seen similar snubs that left scars. Think of Isaiah Thomas being left off the 1,992 Dream Team. That decision was personal, and it took decades for the wounds to heal. Now, in real time, the women's game is witnessing a comparable scenario, but with a twist. Caitlyn is at the very beginning of her career, not the end. The very players and committees tasked with building a lasting dynasty are potentially alienating the athlete who could define the next 15 years of American women's basketball. It's short-sighted, dangerous, and almost unthinkable given the stakes. The fallout isn't just about emotion or pride, it's about legacy. USA basketball risks creating a system where talent is stifled, fan engagement is ignored, and history is written without its brightest star. Every missed opportunity to integrate Caitlyn Clark into the national team reinforces the perception that hierarchy and ego outweigh excellence and entertainment. The system may think it can control the narrative, but in trying to gatekeep the game, it is actively eroding the foundation it claims to protect. The question now looms: will they realize their mistake before it's too late? Or is a dynasty already teetering on the edge because it refused to embrace the future? The final act in this unfolding drama is still being written, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Under the current regime, Caitlyn Clark's career with Team USA hangs in the balance not because of ability, not because of effort, but because of fear and politics. Every stripped jersey, every subtle slight, and every exclusion from camp has built a narrative designed to humble her. Yet, if history teaches us anything, the star almost always wins. Caitlyn's silence, her refusal to beg for a spot, and her focus on her own path have transformed what was meant to be a setback into a platform. This isn't the end of her story. It's the beginning of a calculated rise, one that could redefine how power, talent, and influence intersect in women's basketball. The larger lesson is clear. The game does not belong to the gatekeepers, the committees, or even the coaches. It belongs to the players who ignite passion and the fans who show up to witness it. Caitlyn Clark is leveraging that reality like few athletes ever have. The system tried to suppress her, but instead, it highlighted their own insecurity, mismanagement, and short-sightedness. Every arena she fills, every record she breaks, and every moment she dominates becomes a reminder of what they tried to discard. The revenge tour isn't hypothetical, it's already underway. And as fans, there's one simple way to stay connected to this journey. Like this video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Support the conversation, because Caitlyn Clark's story is far from over, and the world is watching closely.